and data-led insights improve, an organization's well-being strategies. So we're really excited as part of that. But what I'm going to do in the first instance is just tell you a little bit about who Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing are and who we are in relation to Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing. So today, as part of the session, I'm facilitating. My name is Chagan. I have double hats that I wear. So during the day, I work as the head of people and projects for a company called JSB Labs. And the other hat I hold is the co-founder of Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing. So I work alongside my colleague, Ryan Briggs, and a leadership team that really brings together a group of wellbeing or HR leads to learn and share from best practice. Now, Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing is a non-for-profit community interest company. That was a mouthful. That means that this company is not designed to make any profit, but we generate funding to grow the community and ensure we are more sustainable. So if you'd like to find out more, we will be putting something into the chat, and please feel free to go to the website and learn more. We have had some fantastic support, one of which is from Govox, who are facilitating and driving this session today, together with some of our other sponsors, such as Hayes. We've got the Jordan Legacy from a charity perspective. We've got ULife, we've got Margie. We've also got some work that we do with Business for Health and several others. And we are really privileged to be able to have that support in order to drive the agenda that we have in terms of the work that we do. In terms of housekeeping, and today I'll go through an agenda shortly. But as I said at the start, please do keep your questions or anything that you are wanting to ask around this topic to the chat, or when we do have time for questions to answer them then. So going through a bit of an agenda, she says, trying to move the slides. Doesn't seem to be moving. So we'll do a bit more of a welcome and introduction. I've just spoken about who Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing are. We'll do a short introduction to our expert panel. We will have some time at the end for some Q&A, and then we'll also be talking about next steps and how you could get more involved. Looking at our expert panel for today, we're really privileged and honored to be having such expertise within our midst. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Jonathan Bentley, who's going to be our chief facilitator for today, Chief Marketing Officer for Govox. He's a senior executive who has worked in the marketing services industry for over 30 years, has advised global brands in financial services, the automotive industry, sport, consumer, and electronics. And Jonathan joined Govox Wellbeing with one single objective, and that's really to save lives. To let you know more about who Govox are a proactive wellbeing platform, helping organizations to make those data-driven decisions to improve employee wellbeing and culture, and empowering them to be better at recruiting, supporting, and retaining their people. We then move on to PeterTaylor, Global HR Director for Phastar. So thank you so much for being a part of the panel today, Peter. Peter has over 20 years of corporate HR experience and held several senior roles with global national corporations. In addition to his HR consultancy, he had an early startup in biotech, gene therapy, and small pharma companies. He holds a bachelor degree from the University of Westminster and is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. So thank you, Peter. We also have Lesley Worsfold joining us from Hartpury University and Hartpury College. She is the Deputy Principal and Designated Safeguarding Lead. Lesley has a background in human resource management and covers a broad portfolio which includes the management of teams, supporting staff, and student health and well-being. So Lesley is really experienced in looking at the rise in the number of students presenting with complex mental health needs, which require support from the wellbeing and safeguarding teams. Awareness raising and demystifying mental health is as well a range of the support mechanisms. And we know that they are really critical to maintain healthy student and staff populations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jonathan to kick us off with the work that we're doing.
Well, thank you very much, Nuz. Great to see so many new faces and one or two that I've certainly met recently through the get-togethers with Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing that Ryan has kindly put together. So today, really keen for us to bring a number of our partners, actually, Peter and Lesley, who've been clients of ours, but really now to talk about the benefits that data insights can bring. And certainly our experience at Govox, we've been in business now since 2018 and working with over 200 organizations around the world. So we've got a lot of insights. We've done 1 million check-ins with people. And I would certainly ask those who are interested to find out a little bit more about our company, offline via our website. But the focus really today is for Peter and Lesley to share their experiences. So I'm going to be sort of quiz master a little bit today, but I wanted to extract that knowledge from the kind of corporate world, but also from the education sector, and bring that to the benefit of the members and guests of Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing. So if I may, I'm going to start off, Peter. I'm going to task you for just to kind of tell us a little bit more about Phastar, the business, but also your role and remit within that, and some of the kind of key changes and focus that you're driving.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good morning, everybody. It's nice to see lots of people on the call. Phastar, I think the easiest way to explain Phastar, I'm relatively new to life sciences. I've been in it for 3-4 years, but we call it a specialist biometric CRO, which just doesn't mean an awful lot. The CRO stands for Contract Research Organization. So we offer statistical consulting, clinical trial reporting, data management services, and our clients are primarily pharmaceutical companies, biotherapeutic organizations. And I suppose, when I'm with my children, they explain, what does Phastar do? We help organizations, pharmaceutical companies, get their drugs to market quicker through all that kind of data management and analysis. So my role there is I'm the global HR director. I've been there for the last 12 months. So I've just come up to my year this month. And I see my role as, delivering the attraction, retention, and development of our employees, in addition to the kind of day-to-day HR operations that you would expect, but with a real particular focus driven by the Phastar board in terms of our employee value proposition. And, I suppose one of the reasons why I'm here today is because Govox plays a real critical part in that employee value proposition and the data and the insights that we gained from that in what we do. So that's what we do. And we've got about 500, just over 500 employees. The company's been going for 15 years. 3 years ago was a real turning point for Phastar in terms of its ownership, and a large private equity backed by Charterhouse, who now owns majority shares. So again, we're sort of turning the dial up, and there's a focus on not only growing the organisation organically, but also through acquisitions as well. And for example, we made an acquisition in Denmark earlier this year, and I'm hoping there'll be more coming. So that's a bit an idea about Phastar.
So very rapidly changing business. Thank you, Peter. Lesley, just coming to you, actually, I suppose a very different sector to the corporate world, but tell us a bit about your role at Hartpury and how you're both supporting the student body, but also the staff as well.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I'm really delighted to be on this webinar this morning. Yeah, my experience will be a little bit different to Peter's. So as Nuz said, I'm Deputy Principal here at Hartpury. I'm also the designated safeguarding lead. So Hartpury is a mixed economy institution. It's both a college and a university, but it's a specialised residential institution. So we're land-based, and we also have a lot of sports students that study here with us in a lovely rural setting, which is fabulous for wellbeing here at Hartpury. So we've got about 4,600 students and 760 staff. The best way I always describe my role is I really cover all the non-academic functions at Hartpury. So a very person-centric role. I have overall responsibility for HR, therefore all our staff here. And also in terms of students, it's very much student services, and that's focusing on safeguarding, well-being and health. So I guess we're looking after quite challenging age groups, 16 to 18-year-olds studying A-levels and BTEC programs, and then our university students. And out of those 4,600 students, about 25% of those live on our lovely rural campus here just outside Gloucester. So as you can probably imagine, a number of challenges coming with that. My role is really varied, but certainly on the lead up to COVID, then being in lockdown and the various restrictions imposed on us, then coming out of lockdown, there's been a real increased emphasis on supporting both our students and staff with mental health and wellbeing concerns. So we've really worked to create a culture which demystifies the stigma around mental health and to get people asking for support. And certainly we see wellbeing as a golden thread that's embedded in our institutional strategy. But, you know, it's about constantly refreshing what we do with a focus on preventative approaches and having those difficult conversations. And we've been using Govox as another tool, if you like, in our toolbox to support our young people. And also now we're using it with our staff.
Brilliant. Well, it's a good summary and a very broad remit, again, across those two audiences. I'm going to alternate, actually. So, Peter, coming back to you. So you've rolled out a number of workplace mental health propositions recently, and I think you mentioned it there broadly under the EVP piece. How are they directly impacting your people in a growing company, but also the employee culture?
Yes, and we it's a good question, and we implemented Govox October last year, so we've got a good almost 6-7 months worth of data now. And when we talk about culture, an old boss of mine always said to me, you know, what is culture? Culture is how people behave when you're not there. And I think about, you know, I just you know, when I was doing a sort of a presentation at the company meeting, they were saying, you know, what is good about Phastar? You know, why do employees join us? And it's partly because the importance of the work that we do. As a, you know, we pride on ourselves that when you come into the organisation, you know, we want you to be developed at all levels, market competitive package, a friendly teamwork culture, but also as well, you know, environmentally, socially responsible, flexible working, all those kind of good things. But I would say it's enabled us, you know, with our mental health first aiders that we now have in place, and that started in July last year. So we've got 15 across the organisation, trained champions, as we like to call them, and they're very much you know, in the business, so it's not going to your boss or to the HR. So culturally, from that perspective, we sort of almost taken that those kind of mental health propositions out to the employees themselves, and they're involved in it. So getting everybody involved, not just having an AAP helpline or some data on an intranet, actually having it really in every location and in every country. I think also as well, we've also listened to our employees, and Govox has enabled us to do that. So one of the things that came out of Govox very, very strongly, particularly in the first few months, and it was sort of particularly with some of the follow-ups that some of our managers were doing with the employees, we recognized that, you know, menopause was an issue, and support was an issue in the terms of our employees our managers wanting support in how to support our employees with that. So we've also rolled out a menopause champion support program as well. So culturally, without wanting to blow HR's trumpet, I will use the words of our CEO a couple of weeks ago. He says, we've changed the DNA of the organization in terms of how we approach mental health and the well-being of our employees. And I like to say, he says, Peter, we certainly weren't having those conversations 8 months ago. So I think, to answer your question, I think that's the impact it's had.
That's great. And I talk about actionable insights, and I think the data and the insights on a one-to-one, on an individual level or at a team organization level, it empowers people like yourselves and Lesley to kind of have greater insights and then take action and kind of have that reporting piece as well. Lesley, I think the big question, because I'm a parent and I have children of a kind of key age, actually, looking at universities. The current student cohort, and you talked about it in your intro, are those A-level students who a couple of years ago were having some fairly tough times working lower sixth, upper sixth from home and really only going into college or school for their exams and things. How are you seeing that audience impacted by lockdown measures? And I guess what trends are you seeing from the data now in terms of their experience, transitioning from probably living at home, studying, and then moving away? As you say, you've got a 25% residential quota there.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, we definitely are seeing a difference in our young people. I mean, we were talking about the rise in mental health pre-COVID, and that really has continued. I think one of the big things for us is around people making connections with each other. And there really is a lack of social skills since COVID. People were used to being in their bedrooms, studying online, and young people have had real difficulties in making those connections. Social and emotional anxiety has increased. And we've seen that in terms of how that might impact on students wanting to attend social events, for example, or engagement with learning, particularly around assessments, and then now getting back into the world of exams. And this difficulty really in adapting to new environments. So the transition from school to college or school to university, those transitions are not easy, but I think COVID has really impacted on that. When we look at our wellbeing statistics, a lot of issues around low mood and particularly self-harm in various forms, that's increased significantly. We do clearly produce data reports. When we look at the last academic year, we've seen a 23% in increase to our wellbeing team across a whole range of mental health issues. And our students can self-refer, or they can be referred by tutors or family members. We've seen very much an increasing engagement with our female students during the last academic year. They probably make up about 75% of all concerns. And whilst obviously, therefore, 25% as our male students, we've also seen an increase in male students self-referring into our teams. So a lot of things that we've been doing to address this pattern. So in our wellbeing team, we operate daily drop-in sessions. Used to be 2, we've now increased that to 3, with 1 happening in the evening for those residential students. And we've had a real focus on male mental health. We have agricultural students here, and as you probably will know, mental health has really been taboo within the agricultural community, high level of suicide there as well. So we're really focusing on our agricultural students through awareness raising sessions, getting them to talk about their own mental health, because clearly they're going to be the farmers of the future. I see our students as real change makers. We've also got a lot of sports students. So through a residential life programme, we've been having male mental sessions again with sporting role models, and that goes down really well if you can find that hook with students. We have changed quite a lot of our enrichment activities, not so much big social events, but smaller events. It might be a crafting evening where we can get students together that are finding real difficulties in making those connections and making friends. And then just a final point on this is we have significantly for this September revamped our residential induction program. So there's going to be a real focus on team building, resilience building, and independent living skills. And we've used Govox now for 2 years with our residential students. And we're going to be a bit more proactive with our use of Govox. So we're going to be doing that initial wellbeing check-in during the first induction week. And then our residential support team are going to reach out to those students and have conversations. So I guess we can sort of rate their wellness, happiness when they arrive. And then we're going to track and measure that as we go through the academic year.
Brilliant. And actually, we're seeing a number of education organisations looking at that September-October period, particularly for new starters, so year 7 and year 9s, particularly in the independent sector, really kind of weekly, just checking in on them, particularly on the boarding school students, because again, that data feeds back to the pastoral teams to kind of see how those students are bedding into. And I guess there's probably a learning there for wider organisations to track onboarding of new members of staff as well. I noticed also, Lesley, this week that there's a big lobby group talking to Parliament, some of the advisors around the role that universities may need to take going forward around better support. I guess funding as well will be a big question to support students. Thank you for that. I think a very, very good response. Peter, coming back to you actually. So I suppose once things are embedded, bottom line, how's Phastar's healthy workplace strategy positively impacting business performance? It's probably alluding to some of the new KPIs that you're probably talking at board level and at PE house level.
Yes, yeah, and I'm just going to take myself back to, I remember last July, and working with our chief operating officer at the time, and we started to see our attrition rate, both voluntary and involuntary, round about I think it was around about 25%, and sort of month by month, it was increasing. And I'm told that for CRO, 25% is quite good. It didn't feel enough for me. It did feel like for me, I think in that kind of organisation, we're a niche that works within a niche. So we know that our employees are, they're statisticians, they're programmers, that they are highly sought after. So having the correct employee value proposition, the right culture is critical for that. But when you're working for a private equity firm, and particularly an organisation whose purpose is about data, you've got to, when we were talking about Govox and wanting to implement it, I was saying, well, this could be the return on the investment. So we saw it as a way of controlling our attrition rate which was increasing month by month, and being able to, I think that ties in with, it was quite revolutionary at the time, because we were obviously, most surveys or engagement surveys of any nature are normally confidential, and we wanted to know exactly who had checked in, who hadn't checked in, and what were they telling us. So we had real insight to enable us to reach out to those employees. So looking at the happiness scores, the engagement scores, or any of the open comments, we certainly with our senior leadership team, and maybe 1 or 2 levels below that, they had a dashboard for their area, and they were able to actually go out and, in what is a very competitive market, if somebody wasn't happy, reach out to them before they handed their resignation in. And what was the matter? Is it something at home? Is it something at work? What can we do to make your time at Phastar, more productive? And so that's really sort of gaining control of our attrition. And I'm pleased to say that our voluntary attrition now is down into the late teens. I don't think that's too confidential. I'd like to see it a little bit lower, but it's certainly nowhere near in the high 20s where it's going to be going. So that's the first thing in terms of business performance. Obviously, engagement as well. We you know, I'm just in front of me. Some of my team members are on the call actually, and Emily, who supports me particularly with Govox. You know, when I look at our observations for the end of April, you know, we're able to see the positive signs of improvement. So we're starting to see, you know, some increase in actively taking care of physical well-being, good support network around them, having a good work-life balance, coping with the workload. That's good. So it's all going in the right direction. But there's a really clear red flag, and it's saying feeling that they, you know, our employees feeling that they belong at Phastar is not where it should be. So from a business performance, it just means that I've just used our finance directors, our CFO's kind of words. It just makes us incredibly agile. You know, we're able to respond within days, within weeks, you know, and we'll focus on, you know, why are our employees feeling, you know, why are they not feeling they belong at Phastar, or, you know, as high as we would like, and then focusing on that. And we're starting to see these interventions, these quick turnaround interventions having a real impact. And, you know, yes, we have, you know, just thinking about the workforce, you know, we have a large graduate intake, but where, you know, those employees with the kind of been with you for, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, 10 years plus experience, they're the core of your workforce. So being able to attract and retain those employees just has a direct impact on productivity and the profitability of the organization. Yeah, I would say that's the attrition and productivity are the two main factors there.
Brilliant, Peter. And I think it also allows, and I've seen it in my old company, but also in some of our other clients, the link building now between HR and internal communications, and how the comms professionals within an organization can use those insights to build, you know, new campaigns. I've seen it in schools where issues come to the surface and they can change the PSHE curricula to kind of bring some of those topics up from next term right into next week and really address kind of specific topics that the pastoral teams are seeing, you know, physically, eyes and ears, but also digitally through the platform, which probably is a very kind of good segue, Lesley, back to you, because, you know, clearly you've had a very comprehensive, I would call it traditional pastoral process and ecosystem, and now it's been overlaid with Govox. Are you seeing an increase in students and staff using the digital route to kind of express how they're feeling and performing, you know, alongside the traditional? How do you see that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just listening to Peter's comments there, you know, I'm just going to make what I think is an important point. If educational institutions are using things like Govox, if they are creating a culture where students feel more able to speak up about how they're feeling, their own mental health, then of course when they go onto the workplace, they're going to want something similar. So what Peter's saying is really echoing with me, because I think employees of the future will be more demanding around what they want out of their workplace. It's not anymore just about a job and money. It's so much more than that. So sorry, I know that wasn't what I was supposed to be speaking on, but it just really resonated with me when Peter was talking. Yeah, I mean, I think we have really seen an increase in young people and staff digitally speaking up, and Govox is a great platform for that. And we have definitely, you know, I can hand on heart say, we've definitely been able to reach out to students that weren't engaging with our support services. There were no triggers. Their members of staff weren't referring them into our internal services. But through Govox and some of the responses to the wellbeing check-in, we've then been able to reach out to those students and say, come in and have a chat with us. And we've been running it very much whereby in our halls of residence, different members of staff have responsibility for different halls of residence. So it was those members of staff that were seeing the check-in results from the students in their designated halls. So, you know, you can't really measure the positive impact that has. I mean, it's immense if you've been able to reach out to somebody that you would never have known had got some mental health issues. with our staff too, I mean, they've engaged with Govox and the check-in process. And what we were able to do, and we're more in our infancy with staff, but 9% of our respondents had a happiness score of 50% or below. And what our HR team was reached out to all these members of staff and had a conversation. And if they needed to put some support in place, then you know, that's what we've been able to do, which is really great. A bit like Peter mentioned, you know, we've got employee assistance programs, student assistance programs, and I think COVID's meant a real move away from that traditional 9-to-5 approach where you go and chat to somebody in an office. And I think, you know, digital tools such as EAPS and student assistance programs mean that you've got that 24/7 helpline, online tools, online counselling. And I think it's really essential to have that in the mix of all your other support mechanisms. So I think, you know, COVID-19 has given us a range of ways of connecting with staff and students. And for some, connecting digitally is a preference. It's not for all, but I think having that range, you know, some people are happy to engage digitally when they're in their safe space, which may be their bedroom, somewhere in their home. And I think that's really important to have that range.
And that 9% actually, interestingly, as you spoke, corresponds to a similar statistic of 9% that across the 200 organisations we support, that on the monthly check-ins that we provide, yet 9% of people who check in need to speak to and have a happiness below 50% to someone with, you know, triage and then also some clinical support services. I think one of the other things that came up is this phrase, I'm not sure if it's a standard HR phrase, but flight risk. For organizations to try and identify and have proactive conversations with people much earlier in their disengagement. You know, we hear about quiet quitting. It's been quite a big topic for debate on many of these webinars since, you know, we've all went back to work, hybrid or not. And I think flight risk, and Peter alluded to it in some of the statistics around, you know, employee retention. I think if you can identify that somebody's frustrated, they're potentially seeing if the grass is greener on the other side, and you can have those proactive conversations, then actually a really high value asset, you know, a key colleague in your team, a key lecturer, be it a statistician, Peter, in your business, you know, if you can hold on to those people for, you know, and address, it might be an IT issue, it might be a process issue, it might not be a mental health, but it's coming out in frustration, it's coming out in anxiety. Conscious that we might want some questions from the floor, so I'm going to ask my kind of last question now to both of you. But Peter, what are the top 3 people insights you've derived now from the wellbeing data, and perhaps, you know, maybe some anecdotal real life evidence?
Yeah, it's I think the main insight I find, you know, whether it's I don't think this is anything special to do with Phastar. I think it's in any organisation I've worked in. Is, you know, these it changes the discussion. You know, when we're looking at, you know, engagement scores, happiness scores, or attrition rates, you know, before you have this insight and this data, you're quite often sitting in a meeting room with senior leaders, and there's just lots of finger pointing and discussion about why various individuals think, you know, various individuals think, you know, why we are where we are. Whereas this kind of data takes the finger pointing away, and it almost says to me, well, you know what's wrong. It's telling you what's wrong. You know, so it changes the discussion away from finger pointing to action, and it's almost, because you've got check-ins, you know, it's open 24/7, so you've got check-ins every month. You can pretty much, you know, I know one senior leader actually has a separate screen with a dashboard up. You know, he has a good 40% of the organization reporting it to him globally. He needs to know, you know, who's happy and who's not happy, and, you know, and what can he do. So he's keeping an eye on that every day. So yeah, it takes away the finger pointing. Also, I think the second insight is employees want to be heard. This is not rocket science. They're more than happy to tell you how they feel. If they feel great, if they don't feel great, we got some feedback where we know, certainly in terms of our well-being, and I think this is one of the reasons why our well-being, in terms of actively taking care of physical well-being, having a good work-life balance, we've started to see some of our scores since October increase in that area, because we're doing things like, we had a menopause champion support workshop where we had over 300 employees attend. We've only got 500 employees. This week we've got a personal resilience and tips for managing stress workshop. Invited, all employees can come to that as well. So as I say, it's employers want to be heard. It's not rocket science, so. It's almost like a gift. It's almost just presented in front of you. So that's my take on it. I think the last thing, just the insight as well, as we're sort of growing and developing our HR team at Phastar, particularly since I joined in the last year, we've really built out our HR business partner capability. So everybody in the business has somebody they can partner with. And the same in finance and the like. This is a good starting point. If you join as an HR business partner of Phastar, the first thing you're doing is you're given your area's dashboard to work with, and you go and sit with your one or two senior leaders, and actually start the discussions there, really, in terms of who's happy and who's not happy. So it's about getting there quickly. And just, rather than that taking 3-6 months, you're having those kind of discussions in a week. So they're my sort of insights from that, really.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I think I wrote down 2 words, it's tactical and strategic. And I think that's kind of the empowerment that data and these insights are bringing to HR leaders. And Lesley, sort of probably the same question, actually. So in your world, sort of education and workplace, obviously, because you bridge both, but what are the top 3 people insights that you've derived, having had probably for a longer period now, for nearly 2 years, the Govox insights, and what that's perhaps allowing you to act on strategically, but also tactically as well?
Yeah, I think through the check-in process, it really is about encouraging those open and honest conversations and being proactive. I think when you start with a digital check-in, young people and staff are more likely to share their concerns. And once you know about them, you can deal with them and have those transparent and honest conversations. So, I think that's really, really key. We've certainly found out from the use of Govox with our students that problems around making friends, building relationships really is an issue in the post-COVID world. I think our wellbeing data for this academic year shows that students having difficulty in making those connections is up by 48%. So knowing that, we can really adjust and do things differently around, how we reach out to students and those sort of enrichment events that we put on. I think what is huge is that there is uncertainty, both with students and staff, and really that's life in general. And that's where we've seen a bit of increase in anxiety and low mood. It was all about COVID, but now it's about the cost of living crisis, particularly for young people. There's that uncertainty about what are they going to do after college and university? How are they going to get a job? How are they going to cope financially? And I think issues are similar for staff. So that's why I see really well-being as being absolutely key. It's got to be at the top table. It's got to be embedded within your institutional strategy. It's that golden thread that goes through everything. And it is about that culture where, mental health is a conversation daily. It happens every day, because I think that when staff are looking at a new organisation, an organisation that really puts well-being at the heart of everything that it does in its culture is important. It's, as I said earlier, it's more than just what you're going to be earning. And I think for students, yes, they want to come and study. If you come to Hartpury, you probably love sport or you love all things equine. But for students, and particularly for parents, understanding that the organisation really cares about you as an individual, you're not just a number, and they're going to support you, and there's interventions in place around mental health and wellness, really have to be top priority.
And we'd love to see in the near future almost a kind of league table or some form of reporting where the student experience, which is derived from the student voice, is a key part of some form of classification, perhaps. Have students really enjoyed their experience, both academically, socially, emotionally, as they've developed through colleges, and I think as parents, but also as employers. And Peter will see this is those students coming through, who've had positive learning experiences and social experiences in university, they are looking at, and you made a good point earlier on, in the recruitment process now. And I think employers need to really think about that. What is the employment brand? What is their reputation, not just about the products and services and the sort of profitability, but actually around that on pre-onboarding, that attracting good talent, neurodiverse, etc. Very almost the new KPIs in the recruitment space. So, well, listen, thank you very much, both of you, for answering my not quite Paxman-esque questions, but I think it's opened the debate, and it's been lovely to hear from both of you to give the kind of corporate and the sort of education workspace. I think a kind of closing point for me, just to talk very quickly about what I see very much going forward, employers who are wanting to embrace new technology. We're one of those solutions. But I think this integration now between the traditional and the new tech is starting to really kind of give employees more voice, and people, we find, I'm just looking at my numbers here, 65% of people who have checked in with us actually have done it non-anonymously. So they've shared their concerns and their aspirations through the check-in, so that Peter, Lesley, people like yourselves can really kind of understand that the employee voice. And I think I want to see that number increasing, because I think trust, honesty, culture, these are all really important things. We do find we have good check-in rates, but each organisation, it will vary based on, I think, culture. I think how programs like this are being rolled out as part of that broader wellbeing cultural strategy. But we're certainly there to support and guide future partners in how to best kind of integrate Govox into the overall wellbeing strategy. So Nuz, Ryan, thank you very much for allowing me to bring some of my business partners to this call, and thank you for the platform. I'd love to maybe take questions, or if not, we're finishing broadly on time.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. So first of all, a really big thank you to both Lesley and Peter for the insights. And I think just drawing out some of what was amazing content there, because I think there's a lot to learn from. I just wanted to hone in on a couple of points there, first of all. And I think, Lesley, to your point, one of the things that I do think Govox does well is really honing in on those factors that perhaps we don't put enough attention to. And you gave some really good examples when we talk to things like connection and understanding emotions, because I think those are topics perhaps when we look at well-being and well-being strategies, and my experience has been in the background of those well-being strategies, we look at it we look at data, we look at what services we have, but I guess we don't get under the bonnet actually, how does a human being function? It's no longer enough that I come to work. I come to work as a whole entity, a whole individual who has certain emotions. What happens at home, I bring in to work. So it's all this concept of presenteeism, what influences productivity. So I just think that was a really crucial point there to bring up, because I think in much of your insight and your conversation, you draw in that, around connection and what the actual COVID pandemic did to our young people in understanding social interaction, when they so easily able to just sit behind a screen because they don't have the confidence. And I think that's quite crucial. The other thing is around, I think, Peter, you mentioned this, that when you give people the platform and the safety, the psychological safety, to be able to be open and share where they are, they do take that chance. And I think, to your point, Lesley, people nowadays, we just see it on Facebook, we see it on every social media platform, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, that they are willing to share when you ask the right questions. And I think this, again, from Govox perspective, is something that's done well, is ask the right questions and you will get some answers. And I think that's really insightful. The third thing that I took away is something that I think, Peter, I don't often hear about in these circles of, I guess, well-being. We put a big, strong focus on how we are going to recruit really great talent. And that's really essential nowadays, because the talent of today is not willing to just accept the salary. In fact, some of the time they will compromise the salary over well-being and how you treat them and a sense of belonging. I think this thing of looking at the ones within our organization, the attrition levels, is really crucial for organizations. I think we're not doing enough of that from a well-being strategy. Is we look at those new starters, the young people coming in, what issues we're having, but actually from a profitability perspective, I think you've honed in really well there at Phastar in terms of that is the group that you also need to look at, the 3 to 5 year old ones who potentially would be looking elsewhere if we don't start looking at that. So that was really good. And I think the thing that I'd like to commend both of you is just how you've managed to embed it in the organizations you are at. Peter, you reference the statements made by the CEO. You talked a lot around how you've changed the conversations and that data and KPIs are driving the conversation. It's not about finger pointing, it's we've got a problem, how are we going to fix it? So on that note, I just wanted to kind of summarize some of the really great insight that we have there. And, you know, I'm sure when we go back and revisit some of these, there'll be some really crucial ones we'll pull out there, because I mean, my list is endless, Sonia, but I don't want to take so much time in drawing out even more of your great insights. Jonathan, I just wanted to kind of address a question I guess we have in terms of looking at Govox and what you are seeing across organizations. A lot of the work that Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing looks at is around emerging trends. What do you see coming through, or that's coming through Govox as emerging trends in wellbeing data?
Probably a good closing question, actually. Yes, we're talking to 200 companies now, 10 different markets. So we're kind of seeing a much more global view. I see in conversations an increasing need by leaders, and it's not just HR, it can be ops directors and board, really looking to have greater auditing and reporting. So having kind of an ear, a lens, a different lens on this, you know, kind of what is going on in our organization. Talking to other C-suite leaders, I hear now increasingly the first question at a board meeting is, how are our people? Not how much money did we make, or, you know, is our factory running at full capacity? So I think, you know, whether it's COVID or whether it's, you know, everything that's been in the media, there's a lot more sort of humanity, I think, coming into this. So for us, it's really pleasing to hear that. Finally, you know, organizations are really seeing great value in listening to their people, not just from a you know, financial point of view, because mental health and physical health is a big, you know, drain on company costs. You know, we know the Deloitte thing said 56 billion pounds, you know, cost to UK employers back in 2021. That's an enormous amount of money. 7% of most wage bills, you know, is lost to mental health. So I think, you know, it's not just a sort of financial, I think it's an ethical, a sort of humane view. And I think people want to be proud of the businesses that they lead, but also proud of businesses that they work for. So this sort of cultural employee experience is becoming quite a big piece. I think organizations are seeing a real positive impact through the initiatives they're doing now. I think way back 7-10 years ago, we sort of, you know, the fruit bowl and the bottle of water and the kind of yoga sessions, I think those days are long gone, and we're seeing a lot of organizations unpacking legacy wellbeing strategies and really using data, but also using innovative partnerships. You know, there are plenty, you go to some of these wellbeing conferences now, some amazing amazing solutions out there. And I think, you know, the innovative leaders are kind of bringing that together now to create a very comprehensive solution that works for individual organizations. I love seeing organizations talk about these new KPIs, well-being, happiness, and our speakers spoke about that. But flight risk is another one. They're looking at the kind of commercial impact of losing, you know, an employee. Actually, you know, not just the salary, but the impact on the team and the sort of the legacy of losing a critical person. So if you can kind of understand how that person's feeling and proactively address that. And a piece very close to my heart, I trained a couple of years ago as a mental health first aider, having had some fairly tough conversations in a former workplace. And seeing now that organizations have not only invested in mental health first aid and advocates, etc., but actually finding ways to integrate them into the proactive you know, culture around changing the stigma of well-being. I think a lot of mental health first aiders in other organizations I spoke to did the training and then were like, but nobody's coming to speak to me. What we're seeing now is organizations are saying, well, sometimes the issue can be with the relationship between the employee and the line manager. So let's direct that initial point of contact. Let's really promote the mental health first aid support resources across the organization and bring those barriers down. So somebody who's struggling, you know, isn't going to necessarily book a meeting with their boss. It's actually with a mental health first aider in a different department, somebody who's completely independent and can kind of provide that initial support. Also signposting, you know, I think it's a massive opportunity. Some of the organizations we speak to have amazing systems and resources in place, but nobody is accessing them. So if we can highlight who, you know, is struggling in a particular area, and then we can proactively signpost them to support resources, support services, or even through EAP to critical, you know, clinical support, particularly for that 9% that need to kind of take urgent action. And I think all of this just adds up to one big thing, is that, you know, we are changing the conversation. Too many of us have worked in organizations over the past where this just wasn't even on the management agenda. It wasn't even on our agenda, you know, as colleagues. And now it's almost one of the top points. And genuinely, I see it, you know, when somebody asks you, how are you? They really mean it because they're coming from a good place. And I think that's an amazing way to end, probably, you know, talking to this community around the great work that everybody is doing in their different ways, in different organizations, different sizes. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to hand over to Ryan to wrap us up. I know there was a question from Susie, so I don't know if you want to unmute yourself to be able to ask your question. But from my end, I would like to just take the opportunity to thank everyone for their support. And thank you so much, Lesley and Peter. It's always great to hear from your expertise as well. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Susie. Thanks, Nurs. And yeah, Susie, if you wanted to come off mute and ask your question, feel free.
That's really kind. Thank you. And I promise not to take too long. And it's slightly off the back of what Jonathan was talking about with signposting. And I'd be really interested to hear from both Lesley and Peter with regard to whether or not the data that you have seen has shown an increase in people using the personal wellbeing reports more. Whether actually speaking up has meant that they have been more proactive about finding help for themselves.
That's a very good question, and I don't know what the answer is, I'm afraid.
The reason I ask it is
that's a good one, yeah.
Having attended an APBG in Parliament recently for young people's mental health, which was incredibly interesting, and I have to say I didn't speak, but I did sit and listen intently. And looking forward to sort of 5-10 years, the problem we have, and I'm sure Lesley will understand this with being in education, is that creating a permission platform like you have with Govox is wonderful. The barrier we have is that the provision of services, I know it's better with adult mental health services than children, is that there is then this stumbling block as to how to get people to use those services. And actually, you know, there has to be a piece here where we're looking at empowering young people and adults to help themselves. And so I was just intrigued to see if perhaps getting people to accept and open up about how they're feeling has actually meant that they are feeling empowered or happier to find ways to help themselves.
Yeah.
Just quickly, sorry, Lesley, before we go, just conscious of time, if I'd like to carry on just to at least get the answers and content recorded and shared. If anyone does need to drop off, feel free, obviously. Anyone that wants to stay on just for the extra time, feel free as well. But yeah, I will make sure we give it the time that it needs. Lesley, did you want to start?
Yeah, I was just going to say, from my perspective, I don't necessarily, Susie, have any data that would suggest that there's more self-awareness and young people, taking on board self-help. However, what I would say is it's certainly something that within our kind of strategies we do promote. And I kind of mentioned that we're really looking at revamping our induction program. And a lot of that will be around what tools are available that you can use yourself to improve your mental health and well-being, so that we don't have a culture where it is, I've got a problem, I go and see a specialist. I think there needs to be some pre-work done with young people, because there are a lot of tools out there, a whole host of tools that you can use. We're now sending our students a self-help checklist before they come and enroll. That's for them to use, maybe talk to their family as well, because we all know the pressure on external services, particularly. So it's got to be that balance. We've got some great internal services here, but they are pressurized. So it's about building resilience. I really feel that that's so important with young people.
Thank you, Lesley.
Maybe I could just give a broader view. I think, yes, access to clinical specialists is the big kind of friction point in all of this. I think from our side, we're seeing schools, particularly now, using data to go to the trustees and look for more funding, because it's evidence-based now. And I'm sure, Lesley, that's in the background behind the kind of the dashboards. I think talking to safeguarding lead yesterday from a secondary school actually in the Northeast, one of the things they're looking is to make sure that with the resources they do have, that they protect those counselling resources with the most critical and acute students coming through. So using almost Govox in a way as a kind of pre-screening exercise, but also to get those students starting their journey earlier. And I think that's an interesting sort of strategic point. It doesn't change the fundamental issue, but perhaps those pathways to it. We're seeing also, particularly in the education sector, and I know, Susie, that's kind of key area for you, we're seeing organisations now looking at student assistance programs, which is kind of deriving out as a derivative of employee assistance programs, and some of the big providers are now working with the likes of NZ Insurance to kind of bring some of those across into Lesley's world, but also into state and independent schools. So that was just a kind of the mid-ground answer, really, from my perspective.
Well, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to stay on, but if not, thank you again. I know Nuz has said her thanks, but thanks for everyone for taking the time. Thank you for Peter and Lesley for being our guest speakers. Jonathan, the host and facilitator with the most. Yeah, we will be sending out the recordings on email to all those that have attended. We'll also be, as I put in the chat, trying to have shorter clips maybe that we'll share to keep the conversations going. Really, we'll be sharing them on the Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing LinkedIn page, and feel free to comment and keep the conversation going. Really, really important that we keep talking. That's what we're trying to get people to do, so we need to do it as well. So thank you all, and have a great day, and speak soon.
All the best.
Bye bye.